taking it on. Sorry about that.
Hi my lovelies, and welcome back to my channel. I don't know about you guys, but I have always been a bit of a horror enthusiast. For starters, the chokehold that Goosebumps had on me needs to be studied. Don't even get me started. The common consensus around kids and anything scary for the most part is no, bad. And while I agree, of course, to an extent, I think there is also a percentage of kids who like scary things and want to be scared, and people don't really know what to do with that. I have this core memory of when my dad took me to see Toy Story 3 in theaters, and we were walking out, and I go, why is it always a good ending? Is that mildly concerning?
Maybe.
But I can assure you, I turned out fine. I'm pretty sure I just noticed a pattern of like, hey, kids movies, everything's always alright, but in real life, a happy ending isn't realistic or always possible. Guys, did I gain consciousness from Toy Story 3? Anyway, as some of you might have seen from a mile away, I am a huge animation nerd, and I've seen my fair share of creepy cartoons, and I don't mean cartoons that scared me, I mean cartoons that have a creepy, spooky vibe. Essentially, this video is just my excuse to talk about a lot of shows I appreciate, and I've wanted to make videos about for a long time, but I either couldn't think of a central point for the video, or the shows are just very popular. But before we dive in too deep, let's hear a word from today's sponsor. Something that's essential for me when I'm watching any form of media is a snack, is a sweet treat, whatever it is, I have to have something. What do you guys know about a good YouTube and eat session? And it's safe to say over the course of binging multiple shows for this video, today's sponsor, Magic Spoon, really had my back. I grew up in a healthy, oftentimes off-brand cereal household. Actually, my mom used to jokingly buy me main brand sugary cereal for my birthday. Magic Spoon, however, is a higher protein, sugar-free alternative that manages to really keep cereal fun. Cause newsflash too, you could be an adult and still have fun, joy, and whimsy in your life. And I know, people say that breakfast is the most important meal of the day, but in the past, it's a meal I tend to forget, or it just seems like a lot of work. So understandably, cereal has always been a go-to for me. And truthfully, having dietary restrictions can be challenging to navigate as well, especially in America where cereal isn't really known for being nutritious. But Magic Spoon contains 13 to 14 grams of protein with each serving and 0 sugar, while their treats have about 11 to 12 grams of protein and 1 gram of sugar. So if you're looking for a delicious new cereal to try, make sure to use my code lulaloopsey or click the link in my description to get $5 off. That's code lulaloopsey or the link in my description. And let's just say you get the cereal and you decide it's not for you. Well, Magic Spoon is so confident in their product that they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Big fan of that policy personally as a picky eater because it can genuinely just be risky trying new things. Anyway, thank you so much again to Magic Spoon for sponsoring today's video, and let's dive into some creepy cartoons, shall we? With a title like The Appeal of Creepy Cartoons, what better cartoon to start this video off with than a show that follows a character named Creepy? Okay, it's Creepella if you want to get technical. Growing Up Creepy is an American-Canadian cartoon that began airing on Discovery Kids on September 9th of 2006. The show follows our main character, Creepy Creature, as she navigates her double life of sorts. You see, Creepy is actually an orphan, as explained in, I said the very first episode of my script, but it's really just like the theme song and or intro to the show. She was left on the doorstep of the DeWeaseled mansion, which happens to be inhabited by insects. So naturally, the insects took her in and raised her as one of their own. However, now she's attending Middlington Middle School, where everyone remains unaware of her circumstances, which she describes as anything but ordinary, especially compared to her ordinary peers and their probably ordinary struggles. My favorite thing about this show, besides the animation, because I am an animation nerd before anything else, is how on the nose they are about Creepy being raised by bugs. Like in Telltale Poem, she was given this assignment to write a poem about her mother for Mother's Day, and it freaks out the whole class when she reads it because the poem is about her mother's natural instincts as a praying mantis.
See what you want, grab it, bite its head off, snap in your powerful jaws.
This gets her sent to the principal's office out of concern, of course, where she's shown these ink blot pictures, and within every single one, she sees a bug of some kind. The assessment isn't what alarms her principal, though. You know the metal bars on the ceiling in like a school gymnasium? Creepy is sitting up there basically helping one of her family bug members who got stuck in one of those like sticky paper rolls. And for some reason, her principal walks into the gymnasium and thinks that she's like suicidal, without even trying to like talk or have a conversation and ask why she's sitting up there, mind you. So when Creepy jumps down, she decides right then and there that she's taking her home to talk to her parents. During this car ride, her principal continues to ask her questions about her mom, and Creepy just continues to answer them, as honestly as she can, really.
Are you saying your mother makes you feel small? Actually, I'm the tallest in my family.
Luckily, when she gets to the house, her family was able to pull together some sort of disguise thanks to the bug that had been with Creepy when this took place. A disguise for her mom, should I say. And the principal leaves the mansion more than satisfied that Creepy has this amazing, empowering role model of a mother. And growing up surrounded by bugs has understandably made Creepy super knowledgeable on the topic. So at the end of each episode, or story should I say, since each episode includes 2 stories, for example, episode 1 is Telltale Poem and Creepy meets Tarantula Boy, but my point is to close out those stories of each episode, Creepy tells the audience some fun facts about whatever bug is relevant to the plot. Like since Telltale was focused on Creepy's mom, who's a praying mantis, she talks about the praying mantis.
A praying mantis doesn't really bite its victim's head off. It's even better. The mantis bites its victim's thorax to paralyze it.
And obviously, Creepy meets Tarantula Boy introduces us to a character named Tarantula Boy, and so she talks about tarantulas. Now, I did say Canadian-American show. Growing Up Creepy was created by Anthony Godd, Chris Woods, and Karen Greenberg, who I believe are all American. The production company, Mike Young Productions, is also American, although they do have connections to the UK, but that's irrelevant here. The point is, I don't really know how this show is Canadian, and I dug really hard to figure it out, and I couldn't find any information. However, I know for a fact it is Canadian, because every time I watch a Canadian cartoon, I have this like That's a Raven eye zoom moment, except I don't see the future. No. I see Camp Wawanakwa, probably somewhere in Muskoka, Ontario, and I guess some could say it dawned on me. You know, get it? Because redonkulous race? Actually, there's multiple Dawns. My middle name is even Dawn, so interpret that how you will. Anyway, in Creepy Meets Tarantula Boy, as soon as he started talking, I paused. I had to pause. And I did a deep dive, because I knew that voice was familiar. And sure enough, Tarantula Boy and Jeff from Total Drama share a voice actor.
I didn't mean to scare her. What about you? You don't seem scared.
Sure, it was disappointing. I mean, it's like you've got dreams for this money and... Hey man, I'm supposed to be asking the question!
This is also the perfect time to mention that Anne-Marie and Creepy actually share a voice actor as well. Small world! Or island, should I say. Now, the character of Tarantula Boy is kind of crazy because she goes on a date with this guy, and it went really well. Except he's not actually a tarantula boy. He's just a boy. How boring. And Creepy is disappointed by this. She kind of judges a little too quick because the plot twist is that his mom is actually a spider. What are the odds?
Mom, am I weird?
Nonsense. You're just like anyone else.
Growing Up Creepy had 26 episodes with a total of 56 stories and or segments since each episode has 2 plots. And if you ask me, it's actually kind of evil that this show only got 1 season because it's genuinely so charming. The animation is really cool. I love the way it's paced, if that makes sense. Not to mention the character design, Creepella Creature, You Will Always Be Famous. This show was kind of an exception for this video. I did not grow up with it, but I started seeing clips of it online during the pandemic, and that was how I discovered and watched it for the first time. And I just think it's so underrated. I say all this like I wasn't 15 when quarantine started. Now, I couldn't actually find a clear reasoning for the show's cancellation. I do have a theory though. About a year after the show concluded, Discovery Communications and Hasbro began working on a project that would end up becoming a short-lived rebrand for Discovery Kids known as the Hub Network. I don't know if that had anything to do with the show not moving forward, but it could have because the show aired episodes from 2006 to 2008. Meaning if the show had got renewed for another season and more episodes, it would have probably spanned across 2008 to 2010. And as I know from researching for my Hub Network video, the Hub launched in 2010 on 10/10/10. The cancellation of this show is also strange because storyboard artist Peter Firk would receive a Daytime Emmy Award for his work on Growing Up Creepy. This was the Outstanding Individual in Animation Award for 2008, and the cool thing about this award is there are no nominees but only winners singers chosen by a jury. So this award not only recognized Peter Firk in 2008, but also Bob of Wow Wow Wubsy and Sandra for El Tigre, The Adventures of Manny Rivera, all three of which are phenomenal shows, let me just add. Also, if you're an appreciator of theme songs from childhood shows, Growing Up Creepy's theme song, known as Creepy Kids, is available on Spotify. The song was a part of the singer Samantha Lombardi's debut album called Full Stop, which released a little under 4 months after the show premiered on Discovery Kids. Invader Zim is an American horror comedy created by comic book writer and cartoonist Yonan Vasquez for Nickelodeon in the early 2000s. According to The Art of Invader Zim, a behind-the-scenes guidebook published in 2020, shout out to the person who uploaded a flip-through of this book, by the way, because $300 is insane. I didn't know about this book, and I love Invader Zim, so I was like, oh, I wonder if I could get it for research purposes. I was mistaken. Back to my point though, Mary Harrington, who would go on to executive produce for the show, reached out to Yonan after discovering his comic book character Johnny the Little Homicidal Maniac. She was blown away by his character design and noticed how it felt cinematic almost. She saw this potential for Yonan to become a director just by the way he composed scenes in his comics. In the 90s, cartoons had taken this huge shift, but in a really good way. People were really used to this classic Saturday morning cartoon format, and while these cartoons like Looney Tunes or Hanna-Barbera would remain influential and beloved, room was being made for fresh and cutting-edge concepts. With these new creatives meant new sets of eyes, a new tone, and undeniably, Yonan fit that bill. But what really intrigued me was the way he developed the characters. There was a tone, a humor that I felt definitely could translate to kids and keep the adult audience. For example, Johnny, who's a homicidal maniac, had this wonderful relationship with Squee, and because of this relationship, you'd have empathy with Johnny. I was fascinated I had empathy for such a horrible character. Yonan really understands characters well, and he's funny too. I had to track him down. Long story short, or should I say short story short, Yonan would end up pitching Invader Zim. It was the first idea he pitched, he came up with it specifically for the pitch, and they loved it. And soon thereafter, he was suddenly a cartoonist making a series for Nickelodeon. Now the premise of Invader Zim is that our main character, named Zim, is an alien from planet Urk, and he's sent on this mission to conquer Earth with a robot servant named Gur as his only companion. Zim is not very well liked on his home planet. They don't take him seriously considering the fact that he almost destroyed the planet and had been banished to work at the food court on planet Foodcordia.
But sir, we're still on our old planet!
Silence! Twist those knobs! Twist those knobs! You! Pull some levers! Pull some levers!
But he decides to quit being banished in order to attend the Great Assigning, which is where all the other invaders are being assigned planets. Zim has to beg to be assigned to any planet at all. And at first they just give him a sandwich, as if he didn't just come back from Foodcordia, where I would assume that there's more than enough food, but reluctantly they decide to assign Zim a planet that isn't even really on the map. It's just a sticky note in the corner which reads planet with a question mark and has like a little doodle. And as for his companion Gur, he's not your typical robot companion. While he's still ever so loyal, he doesn't share the same skill set as the other companion robots. And I don't say this as a diss, like it's genuinely a fact. We watch Zim's like higher ups make Gur from scrap metal and bits right in front of him. Speaking of Gur, I have to mention that this show has almost had like a new life in online spaces in more recent years, and despite the show being called Invader Zim, I only ever see posts related to Gur. Again, this is not a diss. I actually really like Gur. It's just an observation I made, and I have to note if we're going to talk about this show. Like for context, I'm 20, which means Invader Zim is literally older than me, and I see a lot of younger people really into this show now, and I can't make this up, their favorite character is always Gur, which I can't even blame them because he's definitely one of my favorite characters too. What I will say is in a Meet the Creator interview, which I believe was made in promotion for the 2019 movie Enter the Flurpus, Yonan talks a lot about the creative process and starting Invader Zim, but I wanted to highlight how he specifically mentions loving shows that bring out the creators' personalities.
I like when I can see an actual personality in someone's work. When I watch other shows, I want to feel the person coming through. That's my favorite stuff. I want to see that they're making something that could only have come from them and looks like them and sounds like them. All these characters are like you. absurdist versions of you.
And as a creator myself, I could not agree more. I feel like that is exactly the reason Invader Zim has remained so popular and honestly gotten even more popular over the years, despite being relatively short-lived in comparison to other shows airing around this same time. And that's why it shocks me that Zim isn't more of a standout character in his own show. I feel like Zim has a lot of elements of Yonan.
Zim is that confidence that just knows no end.
I'm not giving up. I'll destroy you!
Dib is definitely that little me that wanted so badly to find these things and go, see?
Am I the only one here who sees the aliens sitting in class?
To do a show where all these aspects of my personality are villainous. They're not good people. I like reminding myself of how bad some version of you can be.
Especially because I know it's a new set of eyes on this show, with younger Gen Z and probably some of Gen Alpha discovering the show for the first time. This is really a side tangent, I know, but I would love to hear your opinions in the comments. Gur has always been popular. He was really, I don't think influential is the right word, but he was really big in, the scene community, I know. And I definitely still see that today because I have a lot of scene mutuals. Shut up!
Were you silent? Or were you silenced?
To get back on track though, a lot of people speculate the show's cancellation had to do with its dark nature, and with episodes like Dark Harvest or Bad Bad Rubber Piggy, I can't really blame them. Dark Harvest in particular is such a jarring rewatch. I forgot just how disturbing it was. Dib basically gets his own personal X-scope, which he has delivered to the school. As we know, he knows that Zim isn't actually human, and this only confirms what he already knew, that he's right. Zim obviously doesn't have any human organs, and there's nothing he can really do about that, or so you think. During school that day, Miss Bitters sends Zim to the nurse for a checkup because there's a pigeon on his head and she doesn't want it spreading to the other students. But as he's leaving and gets his hall pass, Dib makes a comment about the nurse discovering his organs. So instead of going to the nurse's office, he starts by stealing organs from every kid in school, starting with the hall monitor, who simply asks Zim if he has a hall pass, and he says, "Say, you're full of organs, aren't you?" That's not suspicious at all.
Say, you're full of organs, aren't you?
Why, yes. Yes, I am.
And you wouldn't notice if you were, say, missing a few?
Probably not.
But why I also highlight the hall monitor specifically is when Zim harvests any of these organs for himself, an item teleports into their body in replace of said organ. And for the hall monitor, it was the same hall pass Miss Bitters tells him will explode if he leaves school grounds. This poor kid, he was given a death sentence. Now, as I said, Dib has his own personal X-scope, so he pretty quickly connects the dots when Zim isn't in the nurse's office, but the hall monitor, who is quote-unquote missing his liver, is there. The most terrifying scene in this episode to me might be when Dib confronts Zim in the cafeteria, and some intestines, I assume, come flying out of his mouth and he just slurps it back up.
I've been working out.
I can't lie, I started getting flashbacks to that one episode of Mr. Meaty with the tapeworm. If you know, you know, and if you don't, I don't recommend you find out. The concept alone of getting one of your organs stolen and your body starting to shut down to the point that you turn into a zombie of sorts is downright terrifying. And to think this was only the 4th episode of the show. I love it so much! Anyway, despite the praise and long-lasting fandom, Invader Zim obviously had a really short run. It was barely 2 seasons, and when it comes to a reason for the show's cancellation, both Yonan and Richard Horvitz, the voice of Zim, spoke to Sci-Fi with their opinions, and they both mentioned 2 things: ratings and timing. I never point to any one particular thing. The show could have come out at any point in history, and I don't think it would ever really be appropriate. I think there's always horrible things happening in the world, and genuine comedy comes from horrible things. I just think it did not jive well with Nickelodeon's image. But it might come down to ratings. If the show still wasn't their cup of tea, but it was doing incredibly well, then that might have been a different story. We were never going to be SpongeBob huge. There's been a lot of rumors rumors that have abounded for years as to why Invader Zim was cancelled. People think it's the Bloody Gur episode because there's a quick subliminal shot of Gur all bloodied, but that's not it at all. Nickelodeon knew about that shot and they didn't seem to mind. But what the cancellation really was is this plain simple fact: we had horrible ratings. And there were two things that were going on in 2001. In January of 2002, Nickelodeon would announce the show's cancellation, and at this point only 27 out of the original 40 episodes ordered were fulfilled. However, to cut Nickelodeon some slack for once, in the sci-fi interview with Yonan, he does say Nickelodeon picked up on the fact that fans weren't forgetting and moving on from this show. They contacted him every now and then to work on some more Zim, and that eventually turned into creating the 2019 movie Enter the Florpus. Speaking of Richard Horvitz, that man's voice has been everywhere, and if you never got into Invader Zim, but he still sounds really familiar, perhaps you were more of a Cartoon Network kid growing up. In the year 2000, Cartoon Network started what was meant to be an annual competition known as the Big Pick. The purpose was to showcase a bunch of animated pilots for a show, and then fans could vote for their favorites online. The Big Pick took place during the summer, so then the winner could get their show on Cartoon Network during the fall that same year. And the reason I said this was meant to be an annual competition is because in the grand scheme of things, it was very short-lived. The contest was discontinued after 2001, which means only 2 shows ever won. These shows were Codename Kids Next Door in 2001, aka one of the best shows to ever air on the network. Who said that? And the first show to ever win the contest, Grim and Evil in 2000. This show, Grim and Evil, while technically short-lived, was a combination of 2 shows, The Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy and Evil con Carne. Out of context, this sounds unnecessarily complicated, but it had everything to do with the way Cartoon Network was producing their cartoons at the time. They used to air these 7-minute cartoons, and according to Maxwell Adams, this meant you'd get 3 7 minutes per half hour.
It was a shift in the way Cartoon Network was producing things in that they used to do 7-minute cartoons, so you get 3 7 minutes per half hour, and generally it would be Dexter's Lab, Dial M for Monkey, Dexter's Lab, so there would be what we'd call a middle cartoon, and Cow and Chicken had that too with I Am Weasel. So when Billy and Mandy started, I had already done the pilot for Evil, so they were like, well, do you want Evil to be your middle cartoon? And I was like, yeah, can we call the show Grim and Evil? And they were like, yeah, because that's going to sell.
This is a format shows like Dexter's Lab, the Powerpuff Girls, Johnny Bravo, and more followed, when they started originally airing shorts on the What a Cartoon show. At the time, Billy and Mandy was selected from the Big Pick, and I guess Maxwell had done a pilot for Evil con Carne, so they decided to combine the shows as segments so that Evil con Carne could be sandwiched in between Billy and Mandy as the middle cartoon for this format. Eventually, the decision was made to split up the 2 shows, and when given a choice of, which show do you want to continue full-time, Maxwell did pick Billy and Mandy, but Evil con Carne was still given another full season of episodes to kind of wrap things up. And I talked about it earlier with Creepie. I love catchy theme songs with lyrics, but there is something so satisfying about a visually appealing intro to a show with just a really cool instrumental, the colors, the skeleton to flesh sequence with our main characters and their names. I could really go on. If anyone watching this has seen the Owl House, I feel like I appreciate the Owl House intro in the same way that I appreciate the Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy intro. I want to give a disclaimer real quick. This show was the longest out of all the shows I'll be talking about in this video, and it made it really difficult to pick which episodes to talk about, and for most of these, I just went with episodes that really stuck with me over the years. And for Billy and Mandy, the first 2 episodes that popped into my head were episode 13 of season 1, Little Rock of Horrors, and episode 2 of season 5, The Keeper of the Reaper. What these 2 episodes have in common is music. Little Rock of Horrors pays homage to Little Shop of Horrors, which is beyond nostalgic to me. I grew up watching that movie all the time with my dad, and I have to appreciate how insanely catchy this whole song is. What an absolute banger. It had me literally dancing all around my room. I had not seen this in years. It was all coming back to me, and then I sat there and I replayed it 5 more times. I also just love how Mandy's brain was so scary that she single-handedly, or should I say single-brainedly, defeated the brain-eating meteor.
Mandy, is that you?
Anyway, Anyway, when it comes to Keeper of the Reaper, it's not only the music, I just think that episode is one of the best, if not the best in the whole show. Starting off strong, this episode actually is the introduction to a lovely character named Fredberger.
Have you been to jury duty before? This is my very first one. Gosh, I love paperwork, especially the part where I get to write my name.
And Fred is essentially the side plot of this episode. He's called into jury duty of Billy and Mandy's trial, but he makes the trial feel like a journey, by the end, let's just say. What's cool though is Fredberger is voiced by C.H. Greenblatt, who is the creator of Chowder, which is another Cartoon Network show I really love. I honestly don't know how I've had solid purple hair so many times and not dressed up as Chowder, but it will be happening one day, mark my words. But that's not all. C.H. Greenblatt also did story writing for this episode as well as storyboarding with Richard Horvitz. And I think you can just tell they had so much fun with this one. Basically, the plot is that Billy and Mandy are going to court to figure out who's going to get custody of Grim after Billy finds out he has to move away because his dad got a job promotion. The two immediately began arguing over who should get to keep him, so Grim was the one who suggested they take it to court. Another thing I thought was so fun was the Evil Con Carne cameo along with the Scooby-Doo himself in the underworld courtroom.
She may well know the way I walk. I mean, look at me. I'm a stinking dog.
Long story short, the fate of the ruling is ultimately decided by Fredberger in the end, who can't even answer the question of who should get custody of Grim, Billy or Mandy. All he says instead is yes.
Who should get Grim, Billy or Mandy?
Yes!
Which the judge then interprets as giving custody of Grim to only one of you would destroy your friendship, so Billy and his family are placed under house arrest so he can never move away. To travel back to Canada for a bit though, some of you may have noticed I look familiar.
So today we're gonna take a time to show you the bright side of the dark side, and we think you oughta know you really gotta.
Ruby Gloom is a Canadian cartoon produced by Nelvana for YTV from October 15th of 2006 to June 1st, 2008. Although the show only ran for 2 seasons, let me tell you, there is so much more than meets the eye when it comes to Ruby Gloom. You see, in 2002, Martin Chu designed and or created the original character Ruby Gloom for a brand called Mighty Fine. If you're unfamiliar, Mighty Fine was a clothing brand founded in 1997 by Stacy Brand, Guy Brand, and Patty Timsawat. The company quickly became known for their strong design sense and approach to fashion through pop culture. Over time, the partners built relationships with local retailers and suppliers, expanding into licensed categories. An example of this being Ruby Gloom herself, who had her own apparel exclusively sold at Hot Topic. And actually, Ruby Gloom is still sold at Hot Topic to this day. As for this early Ruby Gloom merchandise and apparel though, you can find it on Martin's website. And I did use past tense when I was talking about Mighty Fine, which is because in 2018 they were acquired by Mad Engine and briefly allowed to operate as a separate division, but the end goal was to work to integrate Mighty Fine completely into Mad, with Patty joining the Mad Engine team while the other co-owners pursued other opportunities. But besides working with Mighty Fine, Martin graduated with a BFA in animation from California State University and worked as a character designer for shows like Ni Hao Kai Lan and Kick Buttowski. When it comes to Ruby Gloom, Martin's book illustrations for specifically Ruby Gloom's Guide to Friendship, published in 2004, and Ruby Gloom's Keys to Happiness, published in 2005, were used for the art direction of the show. I will also mention there's supposedly an animated pilot for Ruby Gloom from 2003, which surfaced and started circulating on the internet in 2023-2022, I think. I remember when this happened very vividly. However, despite my digging, I was in no way able to confirm that it was an official animated pilot, or even where it came from. I've talked about this in a handful of my other videos, but you could literally enjoy the most popular character or piece of media, but Google it and sometimes you will find no information or documentation on like the history. It's crazy. But when this pilot is talked about in like online spaces, everyone always says that the show was originally meant to have a darker tone, but I don't know if that's true. The only reason I'm really even mentioning this pilot is because I think fan or official, it's really cool, because despite the like spooky, creepy aesthetic of Ruby Gloom, as a character character. She's very lighthearted, very happy and cheerful, the complete opposite of like the vibe. And so it's cool to see her in like almost this, again, darker tone. Although I think it's less the animation style that gives it this darker tone and more the music that creeps me out, but like in a good way. Like unlike the rest of the cartoons I talk about in this video, I have a very specific core memory of finding Ruby Gloom for the first time. The thing is, Ruby Gloom never actually aired in America, and I was very shocked to find this out, but it was available on Netflix for a short period of time. Again, could not find more information on specifically when, but I, from my memory, believe it was 2016 or 2015. And well, that's exactly how I discovered it. I was just looking for something to watch, and I remember thinking, why have I never seen this? Because I've always been into like creepy and like horror related kids media. I mean, y'all have seen how much I talk about R.L. Stine's The Haunting Hour, and despite my hours and hours of footage talking about our dear friend Jamie Kelly, Franny K. Stein is actually the first book I ever truly fell in love with, and my favorite book series to this day by Jim Benton. So when I saw Ruby Gloom, even though I remember feeling like maybe I was too old to be watching it, I knew deep down I was gonna enjoy it, so I binged the entire first season, and I remember wholeheartedly loving every second of it. Then I just never spoke about it to anyone until I was like 16, because to be fair, this show is Canadian, and it was nowhere near as widespread as something like Total Drama, so the likelihood of me bringing it up to somebody and them knowing what I was talking about was gonna be pretty slim anyways. Speaking of Total Drama, you already know I had to dig into the cast, because Total Drama follows me everywhere, and I can't escape it. So fun fact, Skullboy is actually voiced by Scott McCord, who actually voices many characters in Total Drama, but Owen was definitely the first character that came to mind and the one that had me like, oh my gosh, like he's also Owen.
Yeah. So, what exactly do you do in your club again?
I'd never win, but if I did, I'd start every day with pancakes. Because they're like little mini sunshines filled with yummy fun.
And I've known this for a bit. I started rewatching Ruby Gloom back in 2023 for a video that ended up falling through, partially because there was just like a lack of documentation on the history, and I was trying to research it, and it was just complicated. But again, with the Raven's Eye zoom, that's exactly what happened when I rewatched the first episode after so many years. And it gets crazier. Brace yourselves. You know who Iris is voiced by? Stacey DePass, who not only voices Emma in Crimson in Redonkulous Race, but Nikki Wong in 16.
Oh no! I can barely believe my eye! A horrifying, blood-sucking bat! Ah!
Maybe Caitlin's right. Maybe I am a cow. I know I can be a little mean sometimes, but hey, at least I'm honest.
Nikki is honestly my favorite character on that show, and let me just appreciate 16 for a second while we're here. Not only is that show hilarious, but I applied to my first 2 jobs when I was 16 because I started rewatching the show, and it made having a job look really fun, okay? Now, did anyone actually hire me? Well, no, but it's the thought that counts, and I did march my ass back into Spirit Halloween the very next year though, and they did hire me this time. Me working at Spirit Halloween, pretend to be shocked. I just love Halloween that much. I'm already foaming at the mouth for when Spirit Halloween opens again. My wallet should be very scared. Anyway, sorry, I'm getting sidetracked. Ruby Gloom. Some of my favorite episodes are Unsung Hero, Missing Buns, and any of the Scaredy Bat episodes because I honestly have such a maternal instinct for him. Misery, we need to get you back into the studio because it's been a decade, well, since I saw the episode at least, and I have not stopped thinking about Trainwreck since. She has the voice of an angel.
Stupid dog! You made me look bad!
To circle back to Cartoon Network, you might recall I mentioned a show called What a Cartoon by Hanna-Barbera. A show I did not list that also came from What a Cartoon, because we'll be talking about it, is Courage the Cowardly Dog. I cannot talk about this show without saying that it is by far, if not my favorite Cartoon Network show of all time. When I say I got that dog in me, I am talking about Courage the Cowardly Dog. Anyway, the short for What a Cartoon was called Chicken from Outer Space, and as the title suggests, the plot follows Courage protecting his owners from an extraterrestrial chicken. The thing about this pilot is it's not drastically different from the show, but I did notice 2 things. Number 1, Courage screams silently, and what I mean by this is like he indeed screams, but it's just a silent scream.
Booga, booga, booga!
In fact, the only spoken dialogue in this whole short is one line from Courage at the very end, but obviously in the actual show, there is dialogue. And 2, the Hanna-Barbera influence is more prominent here than in the actual show. This is because Courage the Cowardly Dog is not Hanna-Barbera, but the pilot was produced with their involvement, and you can really tell. I love the animation style we got in the end, but something about the way like Eustace was animated turning into a chicken was so disturbing in this short. But I didn't just mention this to talk about the differences. I just think Courage the Cowardly Dog has a really cool origin story because this episode of What a Cartoon premiered on February 18th of 1996, but a year prior to that, Chicken from Outer Space was actually nominated for an Oscar in the Best Animated Short Film category. Mind you, Cartoon Network wouldn't greenlit the series until 3 years later in 1999, but as a 7-minute short, the show as a concept was already so captivating. Unfortunately, they did have to lose to Peak, aka Wallace and Gromit, which reminds me, oh my god, when I was at VidCon last month, they had a booth with various Gromit plushies and Feathers McGraw. Y'all, they had so many Gromit. Oh my god. I never see any Wallace and Gromit merch anywhere. Oh my god, they're so, they have it in the raincoat. Y'all. Oh my gosh. Oh my,
I'm gonna implode.
Oh my god, I didn't even see it. I'm gonna throw it. You guys should have seen my face. There was actually a second booth with some grommets and oh my god, I'm still so embarrassed. I grabbed one of the grommets and I went up to someone to ask the price and the guy was like, oh, those are just for display. My bad, y'all. I'm American. I feel like I just don't see Wallace and Gromit out in the wild like that and God, I wish British people were real. Courage the Cowardly Dog was an American animated horror comedy that began airing on Cartoon Network November 12th of 1999. The plot of the show follows a dog named Courage who was abandoned as a puppy after his parents were sent into outer space by a crazy veterinarian, which is lore we find out later in the show. He then was found in an alleyway by his current owner, Muriel, and that's essentially what I can only assume inspired the name Courage due to the circumstances in which they became acquainted. Muriel and her husband Eustace live in a house in the middle of nowhere, Kansas, but I'm telling you, freaky things are happening in the middle of nowhere. Don't underestimate. When this show finally aired in 1999, it broke the record at the time for the best original series premiere in all of the history of Cartoon Network. Rightfully so, if you ask me. I don't know what it is about this series, but so many episodes are engraved in my brain, like more than like any other show I think from my childhood. I remember the most about Courage the Cowardly Dog. There are just so many iconic episodes. A Night at Cat's Motel, King Ramsay's Curse, Freaky Fred. Oh my, no. I cannot even think about Freaky Fred. I had to go outside and reconnect with nature when I tried to rewatch that episode. But the episode that has stuck with me for literal years, and I purposely went out of my way to rewatch in preparation for this video, is Season 3, Episode 12, The Quilt Club. Muriel is visiting a quilt shop when she meets Elisa and Eliza Stitch, who are conjoined twins. And there's a sign in the shop for a quilt club, which sounds like a wonderful idea to Muriel. Unfortunately, the Stitches are quite rude to her and don't seem to want her to join, but Muriel is determined to become a part of their club and impress them though, returning to the store several times with new things to show them. She begins to really lose herself in the process of this, and it's clear she hasn't been sleeping to work on her projects all night. It's only when she sews this like life-size football field that the twins seem remotely impressed by her or interested to include her in the club. And while they open her in with welcome arms, there's still this like really uncanny feeling because each time she would come back and like want to be in the club, they would ask her this same weird question of how bad do you want to belong?
How badly do you want to belong? More than you belong with Eustace?
For her initiation, the sisters end up coming over to the house and they ask Muriel to stitch a specific symbol into a piece of cloth. Courage, of course, is on edge and decides to take a picture and confirm what the meaning of the symbol is. Long story short, once Muriel's work is sewn onto their quilt, her soul will be trapped. The Quilt Club members that Muriel keeps mentioning, by the way, where are the other members? Are the other members coming soon? Well, they're trapped inside the quilt. The scariest part of this episode might just be when we're watching Muriel get sewn thrown into the damn quilt. And Courage, he reaches out to try to save her, and her arm is already like flimsy, like a piece of fabric. And if you think that's unsettling, ultimately to save her, Courage has to remind Muriel of her family, which results in him ripping off his own fur to attach it to the quilt. There are several aspects of this episode to me that make it stand out. The tone almost feels more personal because the storyline is following Muriel, and there's something so sad about watching this sweet elderly lady get just taken advantage of. Anyway, that's all I have to talk about today. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching, and if you guys would ever want some sort of sequel for this video, please let me know. I had a lot more shows I wanted to include, but unfortunately this video ended up being a lot more time consuming than I was expecting. As always, I want to give a big shout out to my patrons. I especially appreciate everyone's patience this month since I really meant to get this video up sooner. And I'm curious, what was your favorite show that I talked about? Tell me about your favorite episode from it in the comments. And with all that being said, I will see you guys in the next one.